From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. today.
The Gun Control Act of 1968 helped America prevent more gun violence. From 1963 and 1968, the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. occurred, making politicians question the safety of guns. That, along with protests for black rights from the Black Panthers, America finally started making the bill more urgent, as people were officially scared. On October 22, 1968, Lyndon B. Johnson signed the GCA, putting it into effect, and creating a safer country. What is the Gun Control Act of 1968? The Gun Control Act of 1968 was a bill created as a first step towards gun safety in the U.S. It imposed federal licensing to make, buy, or sell guns, put age restrictions on gun purchases, and set limits of firearm transportations from non-dealers, manufacturers, importers, or collectors. It also strengthened personal gun safety records. The Gun Control Act was an important bill that should be remembered because it was the first step towards gun safety in America. The idea of the Gun Control Act started on November 22, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was shot and killed in Dallas, Texas. John F. Kennedy was the 35th president of the U.S., and before becoming president, he was a very well-known political leader. While it was never confirmed why Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassinator of JFK, killed the president, the psychiatrist that assessed him believed that it was not hatred nor anger towards Kennedy, but a need for attention due to his lack of normal family life. Those psychiatrists also found out Lee was mentally unstable. That caused him to crave attention even more. He had spent his whole adult life trying to gain it, but when his efforts failed, he thought of an idea. He spent a year crafting a plan to gain all the attention by getting on the big stage and shooting Kennedy. His actions started to show politicians that guns can be unsafe when in the wrong hands. In 1963, after JFK's death, it was discussed to put some limitations on guns. Sometime after the discussion of putting stricter licensing and regulation policies on the firearm industry, the bills created. Although it had been created, nothing official such as signing or imposing it had yet happened. In 1967, a group called the Black Panther Party stormed the capital of California in Chicago, Illinois. The Black Panthers were an organization of solely Black power protests. Huey P. Newton was an especially important person in the Black Panther Party. He was a revolutionary political activist and civil rights inspiration who co-founded the Black Panthers alongside his childhood best friend, Bobby Seale.
The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense is organized now throughout the nation. We are recognized internationally, and we advocate that all black people in America are taught what politics is all about and what our history is all about, so that we can have self-identity and we can know where our strength is, we will know our enemies.
It made people begin to fear them due to the fact that it was black people carrying guns, and this ultimately led to an urgency being placed on the bill. On April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the beloved leader of the civil rights movement, and unlike the Black Panthers, he took a non-violent approach, giving speeches and doing non-violent protests instead. He was a very important political figure, fighting for the end of segregation, promoted non-violent tactics to fighting for rights, and spoke out against racism during different speeches, like his famous I Have a Dream speech. He was such an important figure that he won a Nobel Prize. He was later killed by James Earl Ray because of racial hatred, which ended up causing more fear because of how important Dr. King was. This led people to start questioning gun safety even more, which led to the bill being sped up. On June 5, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was shot during one of his presidential campaigns in Los Angeles, California. He died the next day. Robert F. Kennedy was a U.S. senator, a well-known political activist, and running for presidential elections at the time. He was the brother of former President John F. Kennedy, who had also been killed, which made his death all the more infuriating. The assassinator of RFK, Sirhan Sirhan, killed Robert out of anger while being drunk. Sirhan did not like the fact that Kennedy was supporting Israel, as he was a Palestinian, and he said he felt very betrayed by Kennedy's actions.
But why did Robert Kennedy, the friend of the downtrodden, become the focus of this hatred?
Because to me, he was my hero. He was my champion. He was the protector and the defender of the downtrodden and the disadvantaged. And I felt that I was one. And to have him say that he was going to send 50 Phantom jets to Israel to deliver nothing but death and destruction on my countrymen, that seemed as though it were a betrayal. And it was sad for me to accept, and it was hard for me to accept. And just didn't, and all my hopes were focused on Robert Kennedy. I was his supporter.
This showed the government that guns can be unsafe when in the hands of people acting out of their emotions. Finally, on October 22, 1968, after the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Robert F. Kennedy, and the Black Panthers protests, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the bill, putting it into action. In 1986, a new law was created to help prevent gun violence, called the Firearms Owners Protections Act, which amended the 1968 Gun Control Act by prohibiting the transfer or possession of machine guns. When the Gun Control Act was first announced and then signed into action, people feared they wouldn't be able to buy guns again, leading into more short-term impacts such as gun purchases going up, making the availability go down, and ultimately making the price of guns go up. Homicide rates and crimes relating to guns went up by over 20% from 1968 to 1994. One of the Gun Control Act's more long-term impacts was its influence. While the GCA did not work at lowering crime rates as successfully as hoped, it was the base of gun safety in the U.S. It inspired many more gun control acts such as the 1994 Federal Assault Weapons Ban and the Firearms Owners Protections Act of 1986. Another long-term impact was the National Rifle Association, better known as the NRA's leader, getting changed from Harlan Carter to Harold W. Glasson. This was because the executive vice president at the time, named Franklin Orth, supported some of the ideas of the GCA, while Carter did not, making the group ultimately switch leaders. The Gun Control Act of 1968 had no evidence of it helping with school shootings, as it wasn't designed to. Ever since 1760, school shootings have been a problem in the U.S. As of 2018, the amount of school shootings began to skyrocket, going from 59 to 119 in 1 year. Ever since then, the number has increased by around 180% at a peak of 334 in 2023. We believe school shootings are a big enough problem that they deserve gun legislation too. Some people were for the GCA and others were against it. Some people were disappointed it didn't include certain things. Times New Magazine said, "Many were disappointed it didn't include a registry of firearms or federal licensing requirements for gun owners," and reported, "It may take another act of horror to push really effective gun curbs through Congress." Malcolm X, an African-American revolutionary Muslim minister and human rights activist, who was a prominent figure during the civil rights movement, said, "It is criminal to teach a man not to defend himself when he is the constant victim of brutal attacks. It is legal and lawful to own a shotgun or rifle. We believe in obeying the law."
No justification for the widespread use of arms and guns that you can buy through the mail and buy discriminately. After all, we know the great tragedies that this country has seen by the indiscriminate sale of arms. The tragic death of President Kennedy, the tragic death of Martin Luther King, and I certainly will support a gun control feature in this bill.
The NRA were neutral about the Gun Control Act at first. As the president of the NRA said, "We're not thrilled with this, but we can live with it. I think it's reasonable." However, they later came to back the GCA up. We believe that it's the right of U.S. citizens to buy guns and firearms, but it's their responsibility to treat those goods safely and with respect. We believe that it is the responsibility of the U.S. government to protect their citizens by running background checks on people trying to buy guns, and then transferring that data to every state, basically having a national data system for companies selling guns to track. We also believe there should be national red flag laws, and if a person has set one off, it is the responsibility of the government to make sure the person of interest is not permitted to own or purchase a firearm in any other state.